Communication, and especially since we have social media, for a lot of architects is quite new, because it's so diverse at the moment. You could even be creating your own metaverse whereby you could show things you have not done yet, but make everything virtual, etc. But that means that you have to be very strategic, and also maybe on the other hand not strategic, and a bit more relaxed and informal about the way how you talk about yourself. Because I don't mind sometimes on my own personal social media account to talk about my family, or where I am with the kids, or so I don't mind. And on the other hand, I like it also to use it as a platform to communicate my serious professional stuff. So we're not only showing particularly final finished renderings, but we talk about our knowledge sharing or ideas about how we come to certain new strategies of working, like for instance with futurists or with behavioral science specialists, and maybe social engineering or sustainable engineering. All these things become new, and we think you have, in a way, a certain responsibility towards the public to talk about it, because you, as an architect, you might think that you do everything for yourself, but that's of course not the case. You build for people, you build for, even when it is a commercial project or an office standing in the middle of the city, everyone will see it every day, and you're the one who made that happen. So that's why I think you should also be responsible for communicating about it and accept critique, because that is, I think, the only thing where a lot of architects, and sometimes also myself, I don't like critique, but I can handle it better than ever before because of social media and the new communication strategies. Because I mean, it's so open. There's also a lot of nonsense critique going around, so who cares? I think it's important that I communicate the things I believe in. Yeah, I will talk later today about the expansion of the profession and the role of the architect. And the reason is that today, with all the new requirements around technology, sustainability, circularity, social impacts in the way how you work with that in the environment. So many new regulations and new specialists come into the pool of our work, that not only with that we get more specialists, not alone, but particularly the way how you collaborate from your side, also with the client side specialist, because that's where I believe in, that you need to do it from both sides. This collaborative mode of how you expand on the profession. So that's the topic. Yeah, it's quite a statement to thank you for visiting and be here with us tonight. And it must be a bit funny for you to watch at me first virtually while I'm here. It's kind of a double world where we are in today, and that's maybe for the people who are online even maybe a bit more different, but we have visitors. But what is so shocking to hear when you see yourself and hear yourself is that I make a statement where I think about later, gosh, that's what I have to make worthwhile, and I have to promise that truth, what I just said at the end, our best time is still to come. So, I mean, and architects, luckily enough, are never go with pension, so I will never stop. But of course, maybe I said it simply because I believe that the role and the brief of the architect is today becoming clearer than ever before. And you might say, yeah, why? what is now the reason why the role of the position of the architect becomes so interesting, and what is this brief exactly for the role and the position of the architect? And that's why I thought I talk about today, if I get my slides, because I didn't talk about it in the documentary. I couldn't talk about the future. I couldn't talk about so much where I see the profession possibly could go, and that's why this title of the talk was called, was named as the expansion of the profession. And you know what I mean by that, because when we talk about circularity, sustainability, and all these topics coming up over the last years, and these new regulations, because it's not so that I invent these ideas. They come out of so many UN reports, many studies who have been done in the world. So now you hear that we are in London for the. But that not alone, but for instance, I mean, take the family constellation as we knew it so 20 years ago. I think we had only 15 to 16 different types of family constellations. Today we have 46 family constellations. And that means that our social structure of the way how we live, in the way how we are structuring our society is different than, let's say, only 10 years ago. So what I will do is talk about some of these topics, and I will set this chair later back to the right position, if you don't mind. And maybe I can move my slides myself, not? Oh, that was too fast. So let's try to talk about it. I mean, it's always speculative. Don't get me wrong, because some of the things I will talk about tonight are partly speculative, and some of them are not speculative. They already started in the way how we worked with these topics in the office. So the future of architectural planning is about designing for environment and the social impact, and we all know why. Because, like I just said, the environment is changing. Not the outdoor environment or the planet is at stake, you could say. But also, I would say, the indoor environment. We don't talk enough about the indoor environment. If you would know, I did a study for almost 4 years at Harvard with students on indoor environments. If you would see the figures, the numbers, and the data of the quality of air, the quality of the materials we use, the way how we deal with not the right light, the right acoustics, or the right light, or the way of how we use spaces in the wrong way, indoor environments can be improved in a far more better way. So, but particularly the social aspect I will talk about tonight as well. So what we say today, and also of course for the future of our work, we place first people centrally to the way we design. And it's particularly also connected to our urban designs, because we have noticed that so many years urban designers had a tendency to plan top-down. Whereas now what we have learned with all the data analysis we do in cities is that using user group analysis, for instance, where students go, where the residents go, or where the people who work go, you can, with the flow of people and the way how you can connect them to infrastructure, for instance, or how you can connect them to the way you want to make a monofunctional area more lively, you could steer these different user groups to the right mix of program. And the reason is simply because we have built over the last years not only top-down too much, but also too much in monofunctional areas where we feel often lost. Like I said about the project in Melbourne. In Melbourne, in that southern part, it's too monofunctional in its organization, because if you walk around there at 8 o'clock, or we know that also from even housing locations, that if if we don't have enough amenities, then of course you feel lost in a place and you never meet your neighbor, etc. So creating for people and communities is where we put a lot of focus on lately through also the use of technology. The planet I already talked about, the way how the external forces of, and it's not only wind, sun and light anymore as we used to, no, especially Holland, what do we do with water? You know, we have so much pressure on the way how we have to enlarge our dikes. Holland is just fully engineered, as you know. Holland is dealing with a waterbed in a way. We have water on the west side, what is very high. If you live in Amsterdam, virtually the water level is up to this level. But if you live on the east side in Holland, then you would have not the threat of water coming up to that level, not so high as in the west. So how we deal with that, all these things we are, as UNStudio, fully involved in. Well, and as I said, but also clearly Caroline said many times in the talk, we have been always knowledge driven. We collect knowledge not only through our own specialists in the company, but we'd like to work with knowledge institutes. That's why I'd like to teach. Caroline likes to teach. Everyone in the office is allowed to teach in order to connect ourselves to knowledge institutes, etc. And what is wonderful is that over the last years, dealing with the energy transition, everything to do with sustainability, we worked with so many good engineers who helped us to learn that we engineer ourselves or sustainable strategies around the projects. And I tell you, that's what I mean about expanding your own role as an architect, because sustainable engineering is a whole new topic. It's for me something that is exciting, but incredibly complex and so new that you have to connect it to its, for instance, economical values. And of course, I mean, we were knowledgeable about building materials and building cost, but I was not so knowledgeable in the way how we had to improve or advice to all the people we work with. So the investors, for instance, who like to be, sometimes a lot of investors in Europe are now having to go for sustainable ideas. How to advise your investors on how a circular building or a sustainable building can be more creating value in the future than going for a non-sustainable building. And we have found economical models to clarify of how a positive energy building, for instance, this is a project was just finished. This is a rendering, sorry for that, but I soon will show to you the real building. It's close to this image. What is an educational center where a lot of students from the different faculties can come together and share with each other knowledge, and where lectures are given in highly flexible rooms. Like in theater, you could have there an aula of close to 1,000 people. We can also chop it up in 4 aulas, and from there you could have the different faculties cross-virtualizing their knowledge within this building. So students, professors, visitors from the different faculties, also from international universities, can come here and share their knowledge. So it's a whole new typology. It's it's something where a lot of university campuses are screaming for, because it's something what is new. I've noticed a lot of students of mine, when I teach and I do research on the topic of health, then they walk immediately to the medical departments. Whereas I think, I have not thought even of inviting, the medical professors in order to give more specialism and ideas around, indoor environments, for instance. But they do that. They want to know everything about that what is in the other faculties happening, and that's why this building is hugely popular already, even in its use since a few weeks. And students want to have that opportunity to share knowledge. So the future of architecture and planning is about, like I said, the environmental impact. So let's start with that, and then for instance, I like to give you a topic I've never been so much involved in than lately, and that's food. How do we deal with food today, especially in Holland, because we are the second food export producer in the world. So unbelievable. There is an enormous amount of food coming into Holland, but also going out of, and we produce a lot of food for a lot of countries in the world. We are the front runner in innovation in food production, but the ambition is, luckily enough, to become more healthy and sustainable in our food production. But what you have to know, probably some of you might know, but I didn't know. All the food I was eating over the last years and trying to be a little bit more sustainable lately by producing my own food, and I tell you later maybe the details when we have a little drink. But all the food you eat on your plate every day travels close to 33,000 kilometers before you have it on your plate. So that's shocking. And that's really coming from Wageningen, that information from an institute in Holland who did an enormous amount of research on where and how our food is coming from, and where and how it is produced and flies into, particularly then in this case, Holland's in our location. So when I heard this, I thought, why is this? Why can we not produce much more food locally and can stimulate farmers to work on a level whereby they innovate these new strategies around food production in a different way? And you know, it's a conservative world, maybe also here in England, but it's a conservative world. Farmers don't talk so often to each other, they don't network, they don't share knowledge, like I said. But what we did was to talk to, luckily enough, to some of the most innovative farmers around the region of Amsterdam. And we said, would you be interested in a network farm, whereby you would work together and produce food locally for the region of Amsterdam? And suddenly, with them, we did a research on what would that mean. So, where does food come from, and what kind of new kind of production technologies can we introduce, and how can we be transported in a totally different way locally, and yeah, what kind of technology do we need for that was for them very important, because they discovered that there is already an enormous amount of research going on new techniques and new ways of farming, who are, for instance, related to geofining, the way how you look at the fertile ground of where you can produce a particular kind of food, different than the linear way of how we produce food in most of our countries. Most of the food production machinery are having this quite simple system of going linear through the landscape, but never think of what the quality of the ground is in order to connect it to the right type of food you would like to produce. So when we went into the study of how through drones, through new computational farmer instruments could be used, even through new techniques, that would give all new kind of opportunities to work with new technologies in the farmland. But of course, like I said, new forms of working with tech farms is the future. You can do that also in a far more vertical way, better than ever before. And that means that if you would have an opportunity to do that in a building and you make space for it, you could even produce for the whole, for the communities in the sky. You could produce food whereby even each community could be made responsible for that production of food. And I will talk about it a little bit more, because we're experimenting right now in a small neighborhood with that in the southern part of Holland. Not in a tower, but in a residential area. So what we did was, with these farmers, we came up with two concepts, and we presented that to the government and two ministers in Holland. So one was a rural farm, and the other one was a farm connected to the city. So in the rural farm, we thought about the way how you, of course, apart from making food in this farm, that it would be also good to have a research center or a museum, so that people could see and understand what the production of food today could do towards the more traditional way of producing food. How could we, with this, also bring a new consciousness of this new type of production of food towards the public? Was one of the arguments of the farmers, because they were afraid that there was no market for the production of local food. Whereas today, as you know, a lot of people are, luckily enough, since COVID, very interested in good food and the good quality of food. And it's a general interest, luckily enough. So this was the idea. An integral farm, also with a lot of solar panels, so that it could generate its own energy, but also so much energy that it would also be possible to have all the machinery connected to the farm, a control tower, and a museum, and cafes and terraces, and restaurants also to to taste the food who's been produced in this context. And we are here. Very close to Amsterdam, very close to Amsterdam. And this was the other variant, the tower, with this vertical farm, with the different communities, and also a place where, if you would come in the future close to the ring, and I will explain it later of how this works, close to the ring of Amsterdam, if you would park your car and you would have, hopefully in 10 years' time we all drive electric, we would then plug in our cars, and then hopefully with that generate energy for the rest of the farm. And that idea gave us many ideas towards how this could be connected to the infrastructure of food and the way how we can eat better, and creating with that also a healthy environment, because like I said, the physical aspect of health in the built environment is as important as the social aspect. Meeting each other is important, as we know. To make a social environment is critical in a neighborhood. But you have also, of course, the mental aspect of health, where maybe I will talk about it a bit later on. Let me go into this project, because the idea here was the vertical farm. I mean, this was the initial idea of the vertical farm that was connected to an earlier study, also connected to the future of mobility. So I step over from food to the future of mobility, sorry. Where I said to the city of Amsterdam, or we as a team, that if we now know the ring of Amsterdam as almost a kind of negative backyard of the city, because I mean nobody wants to live around the ring, it's noisy, it generates a lot of CO2 dust. But in the future, if we would drive electric, would it not be far more interesting, when you have less sound, less dirty air, to live again around the ring? Would it not be great then that, and we did a study with a group of engineers, would it then not be great to reduce the profile of the ring and then go close to a profile what could be comparable to the boulevards we know from Paris? And would it then not be possible, and then we did an endless study of, if you change the profile with a possibility with the change of the profile, that you then would around the hubs we introduce here, create more housing. Because Amsterdam, especially, well, in Holland, I don't know if you have the same housing crisis, we have a huge housing crisis. We have to build over the next 10 years close to 1 million houses. So, and I'm even talking about the next 8 years, so up to 2030. So then the idea was to create these hubs where you could park. You would not be able to drive into the city with your car. You have to park here. So every visitor, every person who would like to go into to the city needs to park his car here around the ring in these different hubs, and then they can take the bike. And you know, you can now very quickly take an electric bike. You can be very fast, almost in 15 minutes, 10 minutes you can be in the city center. We have more metros at the moment in the city. We have many trams. We can also take city pods. That is an idea many cities are experimenting with at the moment already. From these different hubs, and this is actually the one you can see here framed. It's around the Lelylaan. Hopefully into a city center, what it could be for most of the people car-free. So you would create a far more car-free city center with this model, was my argument, and luckily enough could create an enormous amount of housing around this ring. And luckily enough this was picked up, but not so as I planned it, but very carefully with different hubs around the city where people can park, where the car parks are very closely connected to infrastructure, etc. And people pay less for parking. This is a big thing, you know, almost nothing. And that's a new rule in Amsterdam also. If you have an electric car, you don't have to pay anything for parking space. So by promoting with that, electric driving is stimulated quite interestingly. And you see here the study of the density of the way how we could introduce almost close to 7,000 units around one hub. So that will help a lot on the housing crisis where we have to deal with. You've heard already something about our interest in public transport, but we are, for instance, lately in cable cars. We became a cable car specialist because it's suddenly known that a cable car can be also a very interesting public transport system. Close to 5,000 people we can bring from the southern part of Amsterdam to the northern part of Amsterdam with different cable car systems. You can take in your bike. You have a hub or a cabine for 35 people even. And we all know it is from the ski holidays, but you have to really go into it because it's in a fantastic, sustainable, very cheap transport system. What is becoming more and more popular. And we, you know, from Gothenburg to now Amsterdam, this is actually going to the third phase of analysis, and yeah, hopefully we can get it through. But let me go more into the topic of health and physical health, of how we can make buildings more attractive, that people can walk more in buildings. Like the idea of knowledge sharing, what I said about the project in Delft, was already introduced in the university campus we did in Singapore. It's the SUTD, maybe you know it. But no faculty is having here its own building. We said already in that time, every urban planner, product designer, landscape designer, or institute, department, faculty, should be in one building, in one segment, vertically in the building, so that on the way you would always, when you walk through the building, you would always meet the different professors from the different faculties, and you would have this incredible dynamic social interaction and knowledge sharing opportunity within one building. And I tell you, it works really well. People love to always learn more from what people do in the other faculty, etc. And the cafes, the restaurants around the corner of the buildings work for that the best. So as we know, using staircases helps very, very much for your health. And maybe we have to be careful about the topic of health and what I said, physical, social and mental health. Because not always everyone is born health with a health quality as we know, but how to improve the well-being of people, I think, is a big topic, especially after COVID. And I can tell you, when I started with this research 7 years ago at Harvard, my colleagues were really critical. They said, you're crazy. health is such a nonsense topic to talk about because it's not driven by philosophy or the planet where we talk about. But I've always thought that health is the overarching topic of how you can combine circularity, sustainability, towards a more human-centric approach, because the human-centric approach in architecture is now at the moment a huge topic, luckily enough. And maybe I forgot to say that, but I at the moment can prove to clients that ground value doesn't matter anymore today. Who cares about ground value? If you have no people in your shop, for instance, you can have the best shop at the best location in the world. But if you have no people coming there, then you have no shop. So people generate the real value. People, how they interact, how you make a neighborhood lively. And I'm not talking about commercial arguments here, or I'm not talking about commercial motivation here, but I'm talking about the way how you can make cities more socially healthy, so that, you prove with that you make a neighborhood what is actually working in its full human-centric sense. So, and of course, even we were able in the project to use a lot of green, and we use it as a wayfinding element. So you just have to follow the green to go from the one department to the other department. So the integral approach to health and design is for us important, but it depends on what kind of scale you introduce it. Like I said already, with the tech building we have introduced here, the key was, and that was actually quite interesting, that the client, coming out of 7 buildings, or maybe even more, they are now in 12 buildings in the city center of Amsterdam, Booking.com. They're now going to this headquarters close to the train station. They in the beginning discussed with us, but what shall we do with the way how we can also recruit people? There's a big discussion today, especially we know today the biggest problem is how to get the right people at the right company. It's very hard at the moment for them to get the right people, but the future is that you have the best environment where you work, where you feel that you like to come home to. And that's what we really were getting from the client as a brief, and we formulated together as a brief. And we used many topics around good air in the building, good acoustics, in order to make sure that people also would hopefully stay within this environment. And I can tell you, I get a lot of knowledge out of hospital technology. I go deeply in hospital technology, because you probably would not know that, but in an operation room, air doesn't go from one person to the other, of course, because you cannot have bacteria moving around in an operation room in a hospital. And how they do it, they simply they push the air through the floor into the space, and they suck it out vertically out of the room. So, and that system is the most simplest system that you can imagine, what is not used in our environment. Most of the air rolls through the space. So bacteria move everywhere. And especially after COVID, we now notice that we have used it in several buildings, like in a building in the north of Holland. We were able, with this new air system, to reduce close to 20% sick leave in this project. So this system we use, for instance, also in this Booking.com building. But most important is that we created an environment where people feel good in, and that that the building became a kind of recruiting machine. Maybe I should call it that, a recruiting machine, so that people would love to come here, and that through, let's say, the way how you come into the building, and hopefully then the staircases are big, that you would take the staircase and go to the cafes on the ground floor, where a lot of other public comes from the city to enjoy a cafe, but that you sit also with the city members together, so that you can talk about what you do. I think I have to be careful with my time, because technology I've not talked about, but the last thing about technology is in my belief, and I'm not talking about smart city concepts. I don't believe in smart city concepts. Also, I get a lot of people coming to me with a new company. We set it up, UNSense. Ben, can you do us also a smart city concept? I said, what do you know about a smart city concept? Yeah, you know. Yeah, but have you ever understood what a smart city concept means? And honestly, I tell you, the best specialist cannot formulate what a smart city means. It is not clear. And I believe that we should also be careful to talk about smart cities when we don't have it clear. I do only believe that technology can help for the good things in life, like supporting with that sustainable neighborhoods, whereby you check if the neighborhood is really sustainable over the years. You know, because people can say, yeah, you know, I just did a sustainable, or idea of the sustainable or the energy producing building. You know, I hope that this building we did in Delft is also in 5 years' time still producing energy. And I for that reason, introduce technology in there so that we can test it. In this, in Bruzzano, we introduced with an insurance company a whole new idea of how care can be introduced in such a way that patients could go from rehabilitation into housing, into short stay care, into long stay care, and then slowly into in a wellness community. So the way how patients are moving out of the hospital is very carefully done, but through technology they keep in touch with a specialist in the hospital, but also with a specialist in the community itself. So here, again, a new typology of housing, the community, and hospital technology comes together and communicates through technology with each other's in this particular way. And maybe the key last project, and then I finish, I want to show is a project we're doing in the south of Holland, in Helmond. In the beginning I thought, why Helmond? Because why is this city so interested in doing a sustainable community whereby sustainability not alone, but especially the use of water is going to be used for all kinds of circular means in the neighborhood, but also the production of food. So people have here the opportunity to produce close to 60% of their own food. But then they have to be also responsible for it. They have to inscribe, they have to be part of the system of producing this food. And of course they can decide not to be in this neighborhood, so then they go into the other neighborhood what is more on focus on energy production. So the whole area is chopped up in areas where we experiment with different topics around food, water, sustainability, circularity, etc., etc. And here we were able, with the Dutch government, to find a new tendering strategy, because the tendering strategy hopefully is not going to be focused purely on economical models alone, but on innovation. So we allow investors to come with an architect who have there the best innovation and that they can prove, who actually can financially also do it, because that's of course the risk, that they can then in the end maybe not do it, but that they can prove that they can do it. But here we work also with a data platform, and people are protected in this data platform. So we use a blockchain strategy whereby people are not connected to the bigger companies, but they keep their own data. And that's very important, because this is where everyone is afraid of, that data is going to be shared with with the outside world, but here it's going to be staying in this community. And again, energy transition, everything around water and food production with local farmers. Actually, we work with local farmers, but up to 60% is produced in the region, and also the people in the whole neighborhood can produce their own food. And housing, like I said, is something where, and this project was a tech oriented project, but then the client said, no, that's the nice thing about technology, that sometimes it generates also very beautiful ideas nice ideas for the analog world. Because that's what I didn't say, but I think that technology should do things for a better analog world. So it's a tool, it's a system that helps people to communicate better with each other, or to do things better in the way how we, for instance, in the COVID time, communicate each other through the net. But in this project, the client was saying, well, how can we do affordable housing with a system whereby through these cupboards, you could have a very small apartment, but in the chains of these cupboards and walls, you could say, you could feel as if you live in an apartment what is 70 square meters. And we have been thinking all the time, could it be nice if you then automatically could steer it when you drive home, and that you could change already your apartment in a 3-room apartment, but that didn't work in the end. But where we were able to work with was to introduce these cupboards who are all going to be able for a work plug-in space, a storage space, or a bedroom, or a kitchen area. So they're all foldable, and you know, it's unbelievable. But when the German client actually in München put this on the market, they got so many reactions of people who wanted to be part of this project that now again we have this project under construction. And this this system is produced with a separate company, so coming from a sister company from Vitra, actually. But of course, if you live in a small apartment, you don't want to stay there the whole day and work there the whole day. You'd like to also go to a community space and then meet your neighbors, hopefully on the roof and on the ground floor, where we have many amenity spaces. I'd like to keep it here. Thank you.